The United States District Court for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania sat in the heart of downtown Philadelphia. The courthouse was an imposing building, classical architecture, marble columns, high ceilings, the kind of place designed to remind people that justice was serious business. Courtroom 6A was one of the larger courtrooms, used for high-profile cases, complex trials, cases that drew media attention. And in October 2023, it was hosting one of the most publicized murder trials in the city's recent history, United States v. Marcus Deshaun Williams. The defendant was accused of murdering a federal witness. Antonio Ruiz had been scheduled to testify in a racketeering case against a major drug trafficking organization. 2 days before the trial, he'd been shot and killed outside his apartment, execution style. Single shot to the head. The prosecution alleged that Marcus Williams, an enforcer for the organization, had been contracted to kill Ruiz, to silence him, to send a message. The evidence was circumstantial but strong. Cell phone records, financial transactions, and most importantly, a witness. An old man who'd been walking his dog that night and had seen something. The trial had been going on for 3 weeks. The prosecution had presented their case methodically. Cell records showing Williams in the area, bank transfers showing large cash deposits to his account, forensic evidence placing him near the scene, and now, on day 16 of the trial, they were calling their key witness. The bailiff's voice echoed through the courtroom. The United States calls James Harrison to the stand. From the back of the courtroom, an old man stood. He was 76 years old. Tall, probably 6 feet even, but age had bent him slightly forward. White hair, still thick but receding, deeply lined face. He wore a simple dark suit, white shirt, plain blue tie, nothing flashy. Nothing that drew attention. He walked slowly to the witness stand. Not shuffling, not feeble, just measured, deliberate, like someone who knew that rushing served no purpose. He raised his right hand, was sworn in, and sat down. The prosecutor, Assistant United States Attorney Sarah Chen, approached. She was 38 years old, 15 years with the DOJ. Smart, thorough. She'd been preparing this case for 18 months. Please state your name for the record. James Edward Harrison. Mr. Harrison, where do you live? Philadelphia, Chestnut Hill neighborhood. And what were you doing on the evening of March 14th, 2023? I was walking my dog, a golden retriever named Murphy. We walk every evening around 9 p.m. And on that particular evening, did you see something unusual? Yes. I saw a man approach another man outside an apartment building on Germantown Avenue. There was a brief conversation, then I heard a gunshot. The first man fell. The second man ran to a car and drove away. Can you describe the man who fired the shot? James described him. Height, build, clothing. And then he pointed. That's him, right there, the defendant. The defense table stirred. Marcus Williams, the defendant, sat stone-faced. Next to him was his attorney, Bradley Cooper, 28 years old. Fresh out of Harvard Law, top of his class, working for one of Philadelphia's most prestigious defense firms. This was his first major trial as lead counsel, and he was determined to win. Sarah Chen continued her direct examination for another 30 minutes, establishing timeline, confirming details, and James answered every question clearly, precisely, without hesitation. Finally, Sarah finished. No further questions, Your Honor. The judge, the Honorable Richard Stone, looked at the defense table. Mr. Cooper, cross-examination. Bradley stood, adjusted his suit jacket. He was tall, fit, confident. The kind of young lawyer who believed his law degree made him smarter than everyone else in the room. Yes, Your Honor. He approached the witness stand, looked at James, and there was something in his expression. Not quite contempt, but close. The way young people sometimes look at the elderly, like they're past their prime, unreliable, easily dismissed. Mr. Harrison, how old are you? 76. And you testified that this incident occurred at night, around 9 p.m. in March, so it was dark. Yes. And you were how far away from the incident? Approximately 50 yards. Bradley turned to the jury. 50 yards, in the dark, and you're 76 years old. He let that hang. Mr. Harrison, do you wear glasses? For reading, but not for distance? No. Have you had your vision tested recently? About 6 months ago. And what were the results? 20/30 in both eyes. Bradley paused. That was actually good for someone in their 70s. But he pressed on. Mr. Harrison, at 76 years old, isn't it possible that your memory of that night is unreliable? James looked at him, calm. No. No? You're certain? Because studies show that eyewitness testimony, especially from elderly witnesses, is often inaccurate. Memory fades, details get confused. Isn't it possible you're mistaken about what you saw? I know what I saw. Bradley's voice took on an edge. Mr. Harrison, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but you're 76 years old. Your memory isn't what it used to be. Isn't it possible that you saw someone who looked like my client but wasn't actually him? Sarah Chen stood. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is badgering the witness. But before Judge Stone could rule, Bradley pressed on. Your Honor, I'm simply establishing that this witness, due to his advanced age, may not be a reliable source of information. And that's when Judge Stone's expression changed. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened, and when he spoke, his voice was sharp. Mr. Cooper, approach the bench. Now. Bradley looked confused, but he walked to the bench. Sarah joined him. Judge Stone leaned forward. His voice was low but hard. Counsel, do you know who that witness is? Bradley blinked. Yes, Your Honor, James Harrison, an elderly man who, Lieutenant General James Harrison, United States Army, retired. Bradley's face went blank. I'm sorry? That man, Judge Stone said, pointing at James, is a 3-star general. He commanded the 2nd Infantry Division in Iraq. He has 38 years of military service. He's a recipient of the Medal of Honor, 2 Silver Stars, and 4 Bronze Stars. And you just called him unreliable because of his age. The color drained from Bradley's face. Judge Stone wasn't done. More than that, Mr. Cooper, General Harrison was my battalion commander in 2004, Fallujah. He led 700 Marines into one of the bloodiest battles of the Iraq War, and he brought most of us home. So when you suggest that his memory is unreliable, you're not just insulting a witness. You're insulting a man who has more discipline, more attention to detail, and more integrity than you'll ever have. Bradley stammered. Your Honor, I didn't know. That's obvious. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to that podium, you're going to apologize to General Harrison, and then you're going to conduct a respectful cross-examination. Or I'll hold you in contempt. Are we clear? Yes, Your Honor. They returned to their positions. Bradley stood at the podium. His hands were shaking slightly. He looked at James. General Harrison, sir, I apologize. I was unaware of your background. I spoke out of turn. James nodded once. Accepted. Bradley took a breath. General, can you tell the court about your military service? James's voice was steady. I served in the United States Army from 1965 to 2003. 38 years. I did 3 tours in Vietnam, 1 in Desert Storm and 2 in Iraq. I commanded a battalion in Fallujah in 2004, and I was the commanding general of the 2nd Infantry Division from 2000 to 2003. And during that time, did you receive any specialized training related to observation, to identifying individuals? Yes. Intelligence gathering, reconnaissance, target identification. In combat, being able to accurately identify enemy combatants is critical. Lives depend on it. So we trained extensively, and I trained others. Bradley nodded. He was trying to recover, to salvage his cross-examination. General, on the night of March 14th, you testified that you were approximately 50 yards from the incident. Can you explain how you were able to identify my client from that distance in the dark? James didn't hesitate. There was a streetlight approximately 10 feet from where the incident occurred. It provided clear illumination. The shooter's face was visible. I observed him for approximately 15 seconds before the shooting, and another 5 seconds as he fled. I had ample time to note his features, height, build, facial structure, gait. And you're certain it was the defendant? Yes. How can you be so certain? James looked directly at Marcus Williams. Because I've spent my entire adult life making life and death decisions based on identification. I've ordered airstrikes on targets, called in artillery on enemy positions, approved missions that depended on correctly identifying hostile forces. And I've never been wrong, because being wrong means people die. So I learned to be certain, and I'm certain about what I saw that night. The courtroom was silent. Bradley tried one more angle. General, isn't it possible that the stress of witnessing a murder affected your perception? That adrenaline or shock clouded your judgment? James almost smiled. Counselor, I've been shot at more times than I can count. I've been in firefights, ambushes, mortar attacks. I've watched men die. I've held friends as they bled out. A single gunshot from 50 yards away didn't cause me stress. It got my attention. But it didn't impair my ability to observe and remember. Bradley had nothing left. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Stone looked at Sarah Chen. Redirect? Just briefly, Your Honor, she stood. General Harrison, in your professional opinion, based on your training and experience, are you absolutely certain that the defendant, Marcus Williams, is the man you saw shoot Antonio Ruiz? Without any doubt whatsoever. Thank you, General. No further questions. James was excused. He stood, walked out of the courtroom with the same measured pace, and as he passed the jury box, every single juror was watching him, with respect, with belief. During the recess, Bradley sat at the defense table, his head in his hands. His co-counsel, a senior partner named David Wexler, leaned in. You didn't research the witness? I looked at his statement, his background check. It said he was a retired Army officer. I didn't look deeper. You attacked a 3-star general, called him unreliable, in front of a jury. Do you understand what you just did to our case? Bradley knew. The jury had seen a young, arrogant lawyer attack a war hero, and the judge who had served under that same war hero had publicly rebuked him. The case was over. 3 days later, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Marcus Williams was sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. After the verdict, Sarah Chen found James in the hallway outside the courtroom. General, thank you. Your testimony was critical. I just told the truth. I know. But the way you handled that cross-examination, you didn't get defensive. You didn't get angry. You just calmly destroyed every argument he made. James smiled slightly. That young lawyer made a mistake. He assumed that age equals incompetence. That's a common error. But some of us get sharper with age because we've had more time to learn, more time to practice, more time to hone our skills. Sarah nodded. Well, the jury believed you. Completely. Good. Because Antonio Ruiz deserved justice. He was brave enough to come forward as a witness, and he died for it. The least I could do was make sure his killer faced consequences. As James left the courthouse, Bradley Cooper stood near the entrance. When he saw James, he approached. Hesitant. General Harrison. Sir, I want to apologize again. What I said was, it was inexcusable. James looked at him. You're young. You made a mistake. But let me give you some advice. Don't underestimate people based on their age, or their appearance, or anything superficial. In my career, I've known 20-year-old privates who were brilliant tacticians, and I've known 50-year-old colonels who were idiots. Age doesn't determine capability. Character does, work ethic does, experience does. Bradley nodded. I understand, sir. Do you? Because from where I stood, you came into that courtroom thinking your Harvard degree made you the smartest person there, and you weren't. Not even close. Bradley's face reddened, but he didn't look away. You're right, sir. I was arrogant. I thought I could discredit you because you were old, and I was wrong. It cost my client his case, and it taught me a lesson I won't forget. James studied him. You're talented, that much is clear, but talent without humility is dangerous. You have a lot to learn, and the first thing you need to learn is respect. Not just for generals or judges or people with titles, but for everyone, because you never know who you're dealing with. That janitor might be a former CEO. That waitress might have a PhD. And that old man on the witness stand might be a war hero. Yes, sir. James extended his hand. Bradley shook it, and as James walked away, Bradley stood there, thinking, processing. Because he'd learned more in that one trial than he'd learned in 3 years of law school. 6 months later, Bradley Cooper was no longer the cocky young lawyer who thought he knew everything. He was humbler, more thoughtful. He prepared his cases more thoroughly, researched his witnesses, and most importantly, he treated everyone with respect, regardless of age or status. And every time he stood in a courtroom, he thought about a 76-year-old man who'd quietly, calmly, and completely dismantled his case. Not with anger, not with aggression, but with competence, with certainty, with the kind of credibility that comes from a lifetime of service. Judge Richard Stone retired 2 years after the trial. At his retirement ceremony, he told a story about Fallujah, about a battalion commander who'd led them into hell and brought them out, about how that commander had taught him what leadership really meant. General Harrison taught me that leadership isn't about rank, it's about responsibility. It's about making the hard calls, and it's about taking care of your people. Every decision he made was about getting us home alive, and most of us made it because of him. He paused, looked out at the crowd. Years later, I had the honor of serving as a judge when General Harrison testified in my courtroom, and I watched a young lawyer make the mistake of underestimating him, of assuming that age had diminished him. That lawyer learned a hard lesson that day. We all did. That some people don't fade with age. They sharpen, they refine, they become better versions of themselves. General Harrison is one of those people. James Harrison attended the ceremony, sat in the back, quiet, unassuming, and when it was over, dozens of people lined up to shake his hand, to thank him, to tell their stories. Because that's what heroes do. They serve quietly, without seeking recognition, without needing validation. They just do the right thing, over and over, for decades. And the impact ripples out, touching lives, changing perspectives, making the world a little bit better. A 76-year-old man walking his dog had witnessed a murder, had come forward, had testified, and had ensured that justice was served. Not because he was a general, but because he was a man of character, of integrity, of courage. And in the process, he taught a young lawyer that age doesn't determine worth, that experience matters, that respect is earned but should be given freely, and that sometimes the most powerful weapon in a courtroom isn't a law degree or a sharp tongue. It's the quiet credibility of someone who's lived a life worth respecting. Marcus Williams sat in federal prison, and every day he thought about the old man whose testimony had put him there. He'd assumed the general would be easy to discredit, old, confused, unreliable. He'd been wrong, and that mistake would cost him the rest of his life. Because Lieutenant General James Harrison didn't forget, didn't misremember, didn't get confused. He observed, he remembered, and he told the truth. The same way he'd done for 38 years in uniform, the same way he'd do for the rest of his life. And somewhere in Philadelphia, a young lawyer was building a better career, making better choices, treating people with respect, because an old man had taught him that wisdom doesn't come from degrees or titles. It comes from experience, from service, from a life well lived. And some lessons are only learned the hard way.